Hello everyone, welcome again to the channel. Today I want to share with you some stories related to the current conflict in Ukraine. So the first one is this story about Switzerland. Uh, Apparently NATO was requesting Switzerland to help with taking medical care or assistance with wounded people from the Ukrainian conflict, but Switzerland declared that it was not going to assist this effort because it wants to remain neutral, and they refused to help both civilians and Ukrainian soldiers. If you know the main thing about the Geneva Conventions is that there are some conditions for the conflict. So, for example, if a neutral country, in this case Switzerland, decided to provide medical assistance, they say that the neutral government shall notify to the adversary of the state which accepts such assistance. So, in other words, it needs to be, let's say, formal request, for example, from Ukraine. Then that, because Ukraine is a party to the conflict, then the neutral state needs to agree. When both agree, they both need to notify, for example, Russia about this. The reasons for all these are practical, because let's suppose that Switzerland agrees to get involved helping medically in the Ukrainian conflict, so that allows them to send personnel to the ground and units, for example medical units including vehicles and all kinds of personnel. Then they need to be properly labeled as such. There are some specific labels that can be applied to vehicles and to people, so they can be properly identified in case of conflict. And apparently they don't want to be involved in this. And there is some talk that by doing this they will also have some kind of liability, because if they attend a Ukrainian soldier and the Ukrainian soldier is taken care of in a Swiss hospital, it needs to remain out of the conflict. It needs to remain out of the conflict. It cannot go back, according to the Geneva Conventions, it cannot go back to the conflict. So there are speculations here that if Switzerland was going to do that, it will either have to put the Ukrainian soldier under custody, whatever that means, or should ask, for example, Russia, if Russia will allow the soldier to go back to the conflict. Which is, I don't know which of them are more unlikely. I think a lot of people will think probably negatively about the prospect of a wounded soldier after it was healed will remain under custody, or that Ukraine will ask or Switzerland will ask Russia if it is okay to return the soldiers to the war. And besides, they are refusing to take care of civilians as well. And they're saying this, which I thought it was somehow interesting. They say it is almost impossible to distinguish between civilians and soldiers when it comes to the modern day Ukraine, since many civilians in Ukraine have taken up arms. So even if it is informally part of the army, then they don't want to participate, they don't want to become involved, they don't want to be considered a party to the conflict. And I mean, from the legal point of view, the Geneva Conventions, because Switzerland is a signatory to the conventions, that's why they want to be I guess, a reliable and responsible party to the conventions. They want to abide by those, and I just think there are some options on how they will do it, but I will doubt highly that they will follow all the protocol that is laid down here, because that will imply that they will communicate with Russia, and up to this point they have refused all kind of communication or diplomatic approaches with Russia. But it is possible in theory that they could actually participate as a neutral party, but they will have to consult with Russia, and I think they are not interested in that. If you know, Switzerland has had some assistance, has provided some assistance to Ukraine in different ways, but mostly humanitarian aid, and that's what they plan to do, continue to do humanitarian aid, but they're not providing any kind of military assistance, even though they manufacture some military vehicles or even ammunition, and they even blocked some countries that bought this equipment from sending it to Ukraine, saying that they don't approve of this because that will make them parties to the conflict. So taking into consideration all these legalese talk and all these positions by Switzerland makes the opposite case very clear, I think, in my opinion, that every single country that has provided military assistance to Ukraine is considered a party to the conflict. So that makes them basically, in a legal sense, party to the conflict. So they are allies of Ukraine, literally. So that's also one of the reasons why recently, in another video I made, Israel refused to provide weapons to Ukraine when Ukraine requested, and they have so far provided only defensive equipment, for example, helmets or some kind of protective equipment. Basically, that's what they have been providing. So that's interesting, I think, from the point of view of Switzerland. It's a pity that they are not willing to go full into the protocol and actually help Ukraine, but there are many countries helping Ukraine, so I think maybe it's not completely necessary. So let's go to the next one. Is this one that is a very strange story, in my opinion. So apparently this former NATO Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, whose name is James Stavridis, he recently had an interview, and he was saying that in his opinion, he thinks that between 4 or 6 months the conflict will reach a stalemate. So the stalemate then will kind of lead to an armistice to end the hostilities between two parties. That's his opinion, and I don't exactly know what is he basing his opinion on, but that's what he thinks is going to happen, and he thinks that's going to be kind of the end state of the Ukrainian conflict, that both Russia and Ukraine will reach a point where it is impossible to continue, or there are no gains in territory or in any other kind of context, and both decide that is the best to continue to do some kind of negotiations for an armistice, not exactly a peace deal, but he thinks that this will kind of make the conflict frozen, and that's what they are saying, that this is exactly what happened in Korea. If you know a little bit about the Korean conflict. Initially, North Korea was actually winning the war. It almost completely took over all the entire territory of Korea, the peninsula in Korea, Korean peninsula, but then the United States started to intervene and then turn over the conflict back. And when it was almost taking over the entire Korean peninsula again, then China intervened, and that's when it reached this kind of stalemate, and it was just people dying in both fronts, and there was no progress made. So that's when, after 3 years, they decided to end it, and that's the way it is now. There was never a peace treaty signed, so right now there was this armistice, and it was signed, but the war never ended. So this is what he's saying, that it will happen in his opinion. And then the opinion of this Ukrainian presidential aide, Mikhail Podolyak, said that in his opinion this is not the same. He says the only way to end the ongoing war is to defeat Russia and allow Ukraine to liberate the territories. So that's kind of the Ukrainian position, if you have been following this. So he said that this conflict is different. I agree with him. This conflict is different in many ways. The parties, let's say the military capacity of the parties is also different, and that's what makes it, how to say, more complex, in my opinion. So it is not the same as it was in North Korea, or in North Korea between South Korea. Now, for example, if you see here what happens, it was that it was what they say exactly, a bloody and frustrating war. So there was no advance, not going forward, not going backward. So nothing was making any progress. No party was making any progress. So that's why they were deciding to stop it. And the main thing is that this Ukrainian politician is saying that it was not in the interest of Ukraine or the Ukrainian state to freeze the conflict. They basically want to continue the conflict until it is decided in their favor. And that brings us to this latest piece, which comes from this guy, which is Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba, which we know him very well for his hawkish opinions, and he was recently interviewed by Forbes. And again, there's nothing really new about him, but he continues to again and again give these strange declarations. I don't even know what is the point of them, but he says peace negotiations with Moscow will make sense only after Russia's defeat on the battlefield. And then he says that Zelensky is here. He says Zelensky does not rule out the possibility of negotiations, but believes that there is no reason for talks now. So basically it's just some empty rhetoric, because if there is no reason for negotiations, why are they talking all the time about them? They are talking about negotiations, but they say that they will come only when Russia is defeated in the battlefield. And they say the reason, this is very interesting, he says the reason for the absence of peace talks is Russia's aggressive behavior. What is the meaning of that exactly? Is armed conflict? How are they going to expect the behavior of Russia to be? I don't know exactly if he qualified that statement or not. But he says Russia should sit down at the negotiating table after defeat in the battlefield. Otherwise, it will be the language of ultimatums again. So there hasn't been any progress in negotiations, and with this kind of attitude, it will never happen, But it is also, how to say, very unlikely that negotiations will come in the framework where they expect them to happen. This is the current military situation in Ukraine, and you can see here, for example, the Donbas region, where we have this oblast, the Lugansk Oblast, Mariupol Oblast. The Lugansk Oblast has been already completely liberated from Ukrainian army forces, and the Russian army continues to do steady advance west. So this is the opposite of a stalemate. There hasn't been a single battle won by the Ukrainian army. And I mean that exactly like that. There hasn't been even a single battle won by the Ukrainian army. They are losing constantly, they are losing every day. However, they want to say that they are making the Russian army pay dearly for every inch or territory gain. That's a conflict. It's a military conflict. I'm sure that Russian soldiers are dying, Ukrainian soldiers are dying, but progress is being made steadily, constantly, consistently, and this is not stopping. So this is the opposite of the conditions that are necessary for the situation that he wants to do. This is also the region of Kharkiv Oblast. The Kharkov Oblast is also partially occupied here, even though it was not specifically mentioned during the, let's say, objectives about liberating the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republic territory, including the south, where we have the Zaporizhia Oblast and the Kherson Oblast. These regions have been liberated as part of the other objective, which is the complete demilitarization of the Ukrainian army. So that is what's happening currently. There is no progress being made. They continue to talk about this so-called counteroffensive that is going to take place sometime in August. I don't even know strategically what is the purpose of announcing that there's going to be an offensive or a counteroffensive, because then the other party will be prepared, and that's what seems to have been the case. Russia has sent reinforcements to these areas in the south, so I don't see how this is happening. Like I said before, the main thing is about the military personnel. The military personnel in Ukraine is losing men at a very high rate every day, and Ukraine is not able to train soldiers quickly enough to replace the soldiers lost. I already predicted that this will cause a sudden collapse of the Ukrainian army. It will happen sooner rather than later. I cannot say exactly when this will happen, but it's happening, so that's the situation. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section, and as always, I want to ask you for your support to continue creating content for my channel. In the description of every video I create in this platform, you will find some information about the different options for financial support. And you can also support my channel by liking this video, sharing it in social media, and subscribing. Currently, only about 20% of the people that watches my videos is subscribed, so that will really help me. That's all I wanted to say for now, and thank you for watching. Hope to see you again very soon.